we were going to just do this for the numbers, for the analytics, to get you hyped up about football season. It's just kind of what we do with this channel. But Daniel Demery committed as well. We'll talk about that and Dave Bartoo coming up right after this.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. This is an extra edition, an extra video for this weekend. Hope everybody's having a good time as we go into Memorial Day, and I hope all of your plans meet all of your expectations. And thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell for notifications of new videos, and of course, upvote the video itself. It will be fantastic. We hit 1,000 subscribers, post-game live coming down the pike. Anyway, Daniel Demery from Parish Episcopal in the Dallas area has committed. He's a 4-star player on the 24/7 composite. Ole Miss is getting 4-star, 4-star, 4-star so far. They only have 3 players for 2023, but they're all high-level players, including a top 100 player. But Daniel Demery, I looked at his film. And so the first thing that just jumped off is this is the type of player like an Otis Reese, Isheem Young, those guys. This type of safety, Ladarius Tennyson, Tysheem Johnson. Those guys all play the position a certain way. This guy plays it that same way. He's extremely physical. So I think he might have a future at box safety in this defense because of his physicality. Maybe he would turn into a Jake Springer type clone. But he absolutely headhunts a little bit out there, not in a bad way. Don't mean anything in a bad way. Don't think Trey Elston in that situation. But he's a good physical player that can really turn you around. And he committed to Ole Miss. This has been projected. A crystal ball from Steve Wiltfong was like 2 or 3 days ago. So it was kind of in the hopper to come out, and it absolutely did. So that is a big commitment. We might have more on that a little bit next week, but this show is going to be about analytics and taking the numbers to project what you can expect from Ole Miss football in the 2022 season. So it'll be nice to talk to Dave Bartoo and figure out what's going on. But before we get to that, I want to let you know our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports information. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoff, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL future. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. I think Ole Miss is a 21.5-point favorite over Troy in week 1. And also their over-under for regular season wins is at 7.5. You got futures like that all over BetOnline. You can check them out right now to find out if they have any futures that you might want to hit. Vanderbilt, I think their over-under is 2.5 wins this season. And they are a 7-point favorite in the opener against Hawaii. I don't know what that means, but it might mean something. Anyway, BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including iTunes. So don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes. Give us a 5-star review. You can say Steve doesn't know what he talks about, his guest or primo, all of that stuff, whatever you want to say, just make sure it's a 5-star review. I am here, special treat with Dave Bartoo of College Football Matrix. Dave's going to tell you all about what he does, and we're going to do a little bit of an analytical analysis of Ole Miss and his staff and NIL. We're going to have a good time. But how you doing, Dave?
Good. I'm hanging in there. Right now, working on a special project for an SEC school, and it's kind of fun diving into their requests. So that's what I've been doing today. But glad to be on, and I'm actually really excited talk about Ole Miss staffing through our point of view, because I really feel that in the attention that Lane gets for what he does at Ole Miss and for his social media. I think lost in it is how good the staff is. So I'm glad to be on to talk about those things today.
Okay, before we get started, why don't you tell the listeners exactly what you do, your company, and just kind of use that to give a little bit of a statistical analysis real quick of the offense or the defense.
Sure. Well, you know, the company that I have, I work for individual programs in college football. We cap it at 20. We only work with one team per division. That way we're an analytics firm, because analytics to me create edges. And well, there's a lot of service companies out there that give the same edge to everybody. So it's just a service that everybody has. So we're really limited in who we work with. And our goal for everybody, even in this discussion, whether it's publicly or privately, is always trying to find a story with the numbers. The opinions I give are just me rehashing what I see in the numbers that we have in front of us. So I'm just a storyteller with numbers. That's it. But the ultimate goal is trying to create efficiency with numbers, is trying to reduce risk with numbers. And in the situation like with us talking right now, I'd like the listeners and the viewers to take something away that makes them think a little bit differently about college football, specifically challenging things, asking more questions, not just believing what people tell you.
Absolutely. So we take that and let's just talk about the Ole Miss offense at the moment. Now, obviously, with the quarterback, it could vary a little bit, and there's some unknowns, but like Zach Evans has come in, Michael Trigg, there's some weapons that are there. What are the numbers with the transfer portal and everything? How do you put that in? Because this Ole Miss offense is going to be so different in 2022.
Those guys you just named, I don't know anything about a roster. I never look at them. Never, there's popular guys obviously that everybody knows, right? I mean, everybody knew who Matt Corral was last year. I couldn't name another guy on the Ole Miss roster, not one. So, so what I look at is now all the guys that you just talked about. It doesn't really matter who they bring in, because there's two things that are going on when you bring in a player. Okay. So in this case, a group of quarterbacks have been brought in. I don't care if they're from high school or from the transfer portal. Two things are happening with that group of guys. Number one, they are being evaluated and recruited by the staff the same way as they're evaluating and recruiting everybody else. And there's not a guy in the country on a football staff that isn't trying to land the best guy available. So these guys they brought in, they may not be the absolute number one target, but in terms of availability, this is what the staff feels was the best available. Then who's coaching these guys? Again, it doesn't matter which quarterbacks come in. We need to look at the quarterback coach, the offensive coordinator, the offensive line coach, the wide receiver coach, the running back coach. All those things, especially for a quarterback, all those pieces add up to be very important for quarterback success. So, whether it's you, me, or Matt Corral, the guys evaluating us and coaching us remain the same. And that's where our focus and numbers are, is how good have they done that in the past? How well have they coached in the past to set expectations up for the coming season? Okay.
Sorry, and the staff that Ole Miss, you talked about the staff earlier that Lane Kiffin has put together. You got Charlie Weiss at 28. I think you got like Mo Crum at 34. You've got a bunch of young guys that are out there, but they're also really talented. Like Randall Joyner is one of the preeminent stars rising in the sport at the moment. But what do you? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask what you think about these young guys and the staff as a whole.
Well, the staff as a whole, like I said at the beginning, I think this is where Ole Miss has been extremely undervalued in terms of headsets 1 through 11. Head coach wise, Lane is he's not upper tier of the head coach. It doesn't help that the number one graded head coach in college football is in your conference, so it kind of creates a second tier. But Lane is in that second tier, solid. With 3 or 4 other guys in the SEC. But then after that, you start looking at how you break down the staff. There are some really impressive numbers here. first and foremost, play caller. There is an upper tier of offensive coordinators. There's 4 guys that we have as 5-star offensive coordinators in the SEC. Lane is one of them. Lane, Heupel, Briles, and Napier. And you can pick your order depending on how you want to evaluate these guys, but those 4 are clearly, for their careers, better than everybody else in the SEC calling plays. Defensively, I know you talked about Mo Crum. Now Crum is interesting because he doesn't have a lot of experience. I think he only has 1 year. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but by his score, it looks like he has 1 year of calling plays as a defensive coordinator. But it was a really solid year. So it's hard to give a guy with 1 year a good grade. He's moving in the right direction, right? He had 1 good year. We don't really fully evaluate guys and give them a full grade until 3 years of at one position, so we can really evaluate how good they are. So if there's a guy that we don't know the floor on, it would be Crum. But we also don't know the ceiling. So I don't think we can really pick on the defensive coordinator being good nor bad in this situation. I would just say his progression so far early in his career is definitely in the right direction. I like the hire. I like the risk. Special teams coach, solid. Now, the SEC is full of good special teams coaches everywhere. If you don't have a good one, you're at a big-time detriment in the SEC. So the guys I think that might cause issues for their team sometime this year in special teams, Mississippi State. Don't know anything about the new Kentucky guy. He's never called plays. And the dude at Auburn. Outside of that, man, everything from Eric Link and Pete Lembo to your new guy, Marty, are all really solid special teams guys. I think the big thing, though, for Ole Miss that is never talked about and is extraordinarily underrated is the defensive support staff. Your D-line coach, your linebacker coach, your DB coaches. That is absolutely college football top shelf, SEC top 3. Excellent defensive support staff. So even though Crum isn't graded very high in our system, and he's headed in the right direction, the cool thing is that his support staff on that side of the football is excellent. I think that is the underestimated part of the Ole Miss staff. I think the overestimated one is the offensive support staff. You have a rock star play caller in Lane, okay? But you lost Jeff, who is an excellent quarterback coach. And then the offensive line, wide receiver, running back coach. It took a bit of a hit this year because didn't you lost? Did you lose Smith to Miami as well?
Yes, Kevin Smith went down to Miami.
That was brutal because Smith is a unicorn. He's great at recruiting, and his running backs produce. So you took some big hits in the staff, amazingly. So you lost Durkin, and you lost Smith, and you lost Jeff, and this is still a top 4, top 5 staff in the entire SEC. And that's why I keep telling people is the one thing overall that is constantly overlooked with what Lane is doing in Oxford is the staffing situation. It was better last year than this year, and this year is still really good in my opinion.
Yeah. Is there any teams in the SEC that people might be surprised at actually how bad their coaches are, how poorly they're set up?
Auburn sucks. I mean, really, for the amount of money they're spending, that thing is, it looks like Troy. The staff is almost graded the same as Troy. That's how bad it is. They have the worst defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator combination in the SEC. So while they're still really talented, man, the one thing you don't want to be in the West is lack of coaching. So I think it's pretty easy. I know a lot of people are picking Auburn to finish dead last in the West. That's kind of an easy one just because of the way things have gone down. But from a staffing standpoint, it is by far and away the worst in the West. And over in the East, man, they fired Derek Mason and they got worse. You got a bad head coach. You got a bad defensive coordinator. You have the second worst offensive coordinator in the SEC. So Vanderbilt and Auburn by themselves easily stand out as the two worst 1 through 11 headsets in the SEC.
This may not be your specialty or anything about that, but how did Auburn fall like this? I mean, how did it drop down this quickly over on the Plains?
Well, I think what you did is there's two things really that are at play here. Number one, you lost Derek Mason. That was Derek Mason when he left. If Derek Mason was still in the SEC, he'd be the number 2 defensive coordinator in the SEC. Now you have the number 14 defensive coordinator in the SEC. So there's one big piece of the puzzle. Then you go to the offensive coordinator side and you fire a guy after 1 year that for his career is at worst middle of the pack SEC. So I think you made a really poor choice in getting rid of your offensive coordinator. Then you go hire a guy that's never called plays before. Dude, you're Auburn. You got SEC money. You don't go hire guys that never called plays before in college football. That's insanity. And dude quit. So now you're just down to your backup, and one of the head coach's buddies. And the plays he's called in his career are terrible. So you have those two factors. Then the third factor is I think he went with too many buddy hires on the support staff. Even without losing guys, the offensive support staff, bottom 3 in the SEC, defensive support staff, decent, middle of the pack SEC. But when you add it all up, all the turmoil, below average hiring to begin with, and then losing your really good defensive coordinator and your above average offensive coordinator, it just snowballed on them really quick. And now who wants to go to Auburn with a guy on a hot seat like that?
Yeah. Seriously, it's just weird that it happened so quickly. It's basically like the Alabama program just eventually just put a vice to that program because they're so reactionary to what's going on in Tuscaloosa.
This kind of feels like a lot of self-inflicted wounds here, doesn't it, though?
Yeah. This is the same booster group that did Jetgate with Tommy Tuberville and Bobby Petrino back in the day. And then they go and try. I don't know.
Yeah, because Gus ain't looking too bad at UCF after 1 year. I mean, it ain't going to be long before Gus is right back in the SEC because he took that thing and made it really good last year. To me, firing Gus, this was cutting off your nose to spite your face. Yeah. And then you reached for a head coach. You basically replaced Gus with Gus, but a guy who's never been in the Southeast that hired a bunch of his buddies. It just didn't work. So as much as Alabama is beating up on everybody in the SEC, Auburn could have avoided a lot of this. I believe it's just being a lot of self-inflicted wounds. Where that comes from, boosters, administration, pressure, God knows where. But whatever it is, I think most of it is just caused by their decision paradigm.
Okay, real quick, what do you think Brian Kelly at LSU, how do you think that's going to work out?
Well, it's interesting because Brian Kelly is a lot like Brian Harsin, right? Never been in the Southeast. You know, Brian Kelly had success at Central Michigan, Rust Belt, Cincinnati, Rust Belt, Notre Dame, more Rust Belt, right? And they play good football in the Big Ten. They play good football in the Midwest. But the way they coach it and the culture is completely different. So while I love Brian Kelly, the hire all by itself, Brian Kelly to any program is an absolute, by the numbers, an excellent hire, okay, by the numbers. But culturally, how is that going to fit? And the guys he brought with him, Denbrock, his OC, always been in the Midwest. A lot of the guys he brought with him are guys that are from the Midwest. So he's bringing all these guys with that culture into a completely different one, and they have to reacclimate to that. They lost one of the best wide receiver coach recruiters in college football that they had there. Brian cut him loose. He went to Nebraska. They lost arguably the best DB recruiter, developer, coach in college football. He went to Florida. So on the surface, I love the initial hire of Brian Kelly because he's done everything well. Winning percentage, recruiting, staffing. But I really question what you're looking at right now in Baton Rouge. I don't know if his offensive coordinator is going to be as good as his number, because Mike ran up a lot of numbers with Ritter at Cincinnati. I think it's more the quarterback than the offensive coordinator. He brings in Matt House, bottom half defensive coordinator in the SEC. Doesn't really hire great on the defensive side of the football. Bottom 4 support staff. I think LSU is going to be good on offense. I think they're going to be subpar on defense. But my biggest question is a cultural one. Can you take a bunch of guys out of the Midwest, drop them in the Bayou, and have success quickly? That's we don't have a number for it.
Yeah, it's a heavy lift for Frank Wilson because he's kind of the glue guy down there, and all that. All right, we're going to change gears a little bit. I want to talk about analytics in general because Lane Kiffin is known for going for it on 4th down. There's a lot of 4th down chances they take, but every now and then there's a 4th and 12 that's thrown in there. Is that actually what the analytics say, or is analytics just a crutch for going for it on 4th and 12 there?
I don't buy any of the numbers that are spewed out on Saturday on the TV.
Okay.
I don't. Because most of the numbers that they're talking about are in aggregate, right? If you go for 2 every time, you're going to score more points. Well, most of college football is blowouts. You don't need to score more points. You already won the game, or you already got your ass beat. It doesn't matter. What matters is the 2 or 3 games a year where it's one possession. Okay. And if the numbers as a whole say, hey, you should go for it because you need the 2 points, well, what if your passing game sucks and the defensive passing defense is awesome? Now on the average, 130 teams, it says you should do well. But if you're weak and the other team is strong, now the numbers are changing. Look, if everybody in college football went for 2 last year, every single time, and the conversion rate was the normal conversion rate, every team in the country would have scored an extra 1.89 points last year for the whole season, each. That's how much value it is, okay? That is not enough for me to say this game hinges on this. I really feel that with 22 guys in motion simultaneously, all the different formations, 120 by 52-yard field, you can't break it down that small and be accurate in doing it. So do I believe in it? No. I believe most of this stuff is a gut feeling and how good the play caller is on both sides of the football. How good your offensive coordinator, how good's the defensive coordinator. I think that affects the outcome more than anything.
Yeah, that actually sounds really, really good. The other question would be like, a running back has lost all its value in the NFL for whatever reason. It's basically like a 5-year stopgap unless you're a super elite back like Derrick Henry. Why is running backs valuable in college football, but they've lost its value in the NFL?
I would, and I'm guessing here, right? I don't have the numbers for that. This is now you're taking me off the story into what my gut says about that. And my first thought on that is that at the NFL level, the speed of your DBs and your linebackers are so similar to the running back that because of the athletic development over time, there's not as much differentiation between the great running backs and the great defensive players, speed-wise, right? Guys can get caught easier, gaps get filled faster. It's harder to be a really good running back long-term in the NFL. Whereas in college, a great athlete at running back can still destroy other teams, right? There's still a massive differentiation between a really good running back and a really good linebacker DB in college football because there's such disparity in talent. The NFL, the talent is so even. I think those things might be a big reason why you're seeing the running back in the NFL featured less or is not as prevalent as it used to be versus college where there is a bigger talent gap.
All right. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen today. Now make your second listen Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Raphael Barlow, Richard Strayman, Sam Ferris, Leif Tholen give fans in-depth looks at their biggest prospects, the latest player rankings, and, of course, big boards. Follow the NBA Big Board every day on the Audacity app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Dave, thank you so much for coming by and do this. This was awesome, and I hope we can talk to you again, man.
Absolutely. I hope your viewers enjoy it, man.
All right. Have a good day, man. Enjoy Oregon.